The blood tasted like ash and death, and for the first time in 3 centuries, Lord Nathaniel Thorne felt the gnawing edge of true hunger that wouldn't be satisfied. He collapsed against the marble pillar of his manor's grand hall, crimson streaking from his lips as he spat out the offerings his servants had brought. 12 different humans, all prime specimens, all useless. The curse mark on his chest burned like molten silver, spreading its blackened veins toward his heart with each failed feeding. And through the agony, one face haunted his vision. The ragged peasant girl whose confession of love he'd mocked 3 nights ago in the village square, laughing as she'd fled in tears while the townspeople jeered. Wait. Before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. "My lord, you must try again," his steward Marcus pleaded. His ancient vampire face creased with worry that 300 years of service had never shown. "There are others, nobles, children, the pure-blooded." Silence. Nathaniel's voice emerged as a rasp, his supernatural strength flickering like a dying candle. The curse mark pulsed again, sending fresh waves of torment through his immortal body. He could feel it now, the specific shape of his damnation. His body would accept no sustenance except from one source. The magic was precise, cruel, and devastatingly clear. The girl, the poor, unremarkable village girl named Eleanor Ashby. He'd noticed her months ago, always watching him from the shadows when he visited the village of Thornwick on his monthly rides. She was nothing. A laundress's daughter, thin from rationed meals, her dress patched so many times the original fabric was barely visible. Her face might have been pretty if poverty hadn't hollowed her cheeks, if hope hadn't brightened her eyes with that nauseating optimism the poor clung to like driftwood in a storm. 3 nights ago, she'd done the unthinkable. She'd approached him in the square, trembling but determined, and spoken words that still echoed in his mind with their pathetic sincerity. "Lord Thorne, I know I'm nothing to you, but I've loved you from afar for so long. I see your loneliness, your sadness. If you would allow me, I would dedicate my life to bringing you happiness." The square had fallen silent. Even the other vampires in his retinue had stared. And Nathaniel, lord of the Thornwood territories, master of the night, had thrown back his head and laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and cutting. "You?" he'd said, his voice dripping with disdain. "A peasant girl covered in soap stains believes she can comfort me? Look at yourself, child. You're barely fit to wash my floors, let alone speak of love to someone of my station. Your affection is as worthless as your bloodline." He gestured to his guards, and they'd driven her away with the butts of their spears while the crowd laughed. He'd seen her face as she ran, not just embarrassed, but shattered, the light in her eyes extinguishing like a snuffed candle. He'd forgotten about it within the hour, until he'd woken the next evening with the curse mark searing into his flesh, and a whispered voice in his mind. "Mock love given freely, and you shall starve until that love alone sustains you." "Find her," Nathaniel commanded now, forcing himself upright despite the weakness making his limbs tremble. "Find Eleanor Ashby and bring her to me, alive and unharmed." Marcus bowed and vanished with supernatural speed. Nathaniel staggered to his private chambers, where mirrors, he could see himself, unlike the myths suggested, showed him the deterioration. His pale skin, usually flawless, now appeared papery. His eyes, typically the silver of moonlight, had dimmed to cloudy gray. The curse mark sprawled across his chest like a black spider, its legs reaching toward his throat and stomach. He had perhaps 3 days before the curse consumed him entirely. The irony wasn't lost on him. In 3 centuries, he'd fed from thousands, taken what he wanted without permission or thought, ended lives with the casual indifference of a man snuffing out candles. He'd never considered the cost to others, never paused to think whether those he drained might have had hopes, loves, futures. They were food, sustenance, nothing more. And now the universe had bound his immortal life to the one person he'd most thoroughly humiliated. Eleanor Ashby scrubbed at the bloodstain on Lady Margaret's linen tablecloth, her knuckles raw from the lye soap. The washhouse behind the manor was freezing despite the fire, and her wet hands ached with cold. She worked mechanically, trying not to think, trying not to feel. 3 days since her humiliation, 3 days of whispers and pointing, of children imitating Lord Thorne's cruel laugh, of merchants refusing her mother's custom because we don't serve the families of fools. She'd known it was madness to approach him. Her mother had begged her not to, had warned that lords, especially vampire lords, didn't concern themselves with human hearts. But Eleanor had seen something in Nathaniel Thorne during those months of watching him. Beneath the cold beauty, beneath the aristocratic disdain, she'd glimpsed moments of profound solitude. The way he stood apart even from his own kind. The way his eyes sometimes held an ancient sadness when he thought no one was looking. She'd been wrong. There was no hidden depth, no secret kindness. There was only cruelty refined by centuries of practice. The door burst open, and Eleanor jumped, dropping the tablecloth into the washwater. 2 men stood in the entrance, not local men, but strangers in fine black cloaks. The taller one had eyes that reflected the firelight strangely, like an animal's. Vampires. "Eleanor Ashby?" the tall one asked, his voice formal. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Yes, what do you want?" "Lord Thorne requires your presence at Thornwood Manor. Immediately." The fear that gripped her was primal and absolute. He was going to kill her. He'd humiliated her publicly, but that hadn't been enough. Now he would drain her dry, and no one would question a lord's right to dispose of an impudent peasant. "Please," she whispered, "please, I'm sorry. I never should have spoken to him. I'll leave the territory. I'll go somewhere he'll never see me again." "He's not going to harm you," the vampire said, and something in his tone made Eleanor pause. He sounded weary, perhaps even sympathetic. "But you must come. His life depends on it." Eleanor stared. "His life? He's immortal." "Not anymore. Not without you." They wouldn't explain further. Eleanor had no chance to argue, to refuse, to even tell her mother where she was going. The vampires wrapped her in a cloak and lifted her with inhuman strength, moving through the night so quickly that the world became a blur of darkness and cold wind. Thornwood Manor emerged from the forest like a massive tombstone, all Gothic spires and darkened windows. Eleanor had never been inside, though she'd glimpsed it from the village roads. Up close, it was both magnificent and terrifying, a structure built to intimidate, to remind humans of their insignificance. They brought her through a servant's entrance, up winding stairs, through corridors lined with pale, beautiful faces. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Whatever was happening, it couldn't be good. Lords didn't summon peasant girls for pleasant reasons. The bedroom they led her to was larger than her entire cottage. Velvet curtains, the color of dried blood, framed windows shuttered against any possible daylight. The furniture was dark wood, ornately carved, worth more than her family would earn in 10 lifetimes. And in the massive 4-poster bed, propped against silk pillows, was Lord Nathaniel Thorne. Eleanor almost didn't recognize him. The man who'd mocked her had been beautiful in that untouchable way of immortals. Perfect features, preternatural grace, the aura of someone beyond mortal concerns. This man looked sick. His skin had a grayish cast, and black veins spread from beneath his open shirt like cracks in porcelain. His eyes, when they fixed on her, held a desperation that was almost human. "Leave us," he commanded the servants. "My lord," Marcus began. "Now." The room emptied. Eleanor stood frozen by the door, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. Vampires didn't get sick. Vampires didn't look vulnerable. "Come here," Nathaniel said, and despite his weakened state, his voice still carried the weight of centuries of command. Eleanor's feet moved before her conscious mind engaged. She stopped at the foot of the bed, maintaining distance, every instinct screaming that she was prey in a predator's den. "Do you know what you've done to me?" Nathaniel asked, and something in his tone made anger flare through her fear. "What I've done?" Eleanor's voice shook, but she forced the words out. "I offered you my heart, and you shattered it in front of the entire village. I've done nothing to you except have the misfortune of feeling something you found amusing. Your feelings cursed me." He gestured to the black marks spreading across his chest. Some witch, some magic, some cosmic justice decided that mocking freely given love warranted a death sentence. "I can feed from no one but you. If you refuse me, I'll die." The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's mind reeled. She had power here. For the first time in her life, she held something a lord wanted, needed, and couldn't simply take by force. The realization must have shown on her face because Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Don't," he warned. "Don't think you can refuse me and walk away. If I die, my family will ensure every person in Thornwick burns. Your mother, your friends, every child you've ever smiled at. They'll be ashes before my body cools." The threat was delivered calmly, matter-of-factly, and Eleanor knew with bone-deep certainty that he meant it. This was a man, a creature, who'd lived for centuries by taking what he wanted. Death wouldn't make him noble, it would make him vindictive. "So I'm to feed you then?" Eleanor asked, her voice hollow. "Save the life of the man who destroyed mine? And what happens afterward? You'll drain me dry and dispose of me like garbage." "No." Nathaniel shifted against the pillows, and the movement clearly cost him. "The curse is specific. I need your blood, but taking enough to harm you would kill me as well. The magic binds us. I need you alive and willing, or the sustenance means nothing." "Willing," Eleanor repeated bitterly. "You just threatened to murder my entire village. That's not willing, that's coercion." "Call it what you like." Nathaniel's eyes blazed with frustration. "I didn't ask for this curse any more than you asked to love me. But we're bound now, whether we like it or not. So come here, give me what I need to survive, and we'll negotiate terms afterward." Eleanor stood at the crossroads of a choice that would define everything that followed. She could refuse, let him die, and damn everyone she'd ever known to his family's revenge. She could comply, become nothing more than a living blood source for a monster who'd mocked her love. Or she could negotiate now, while she held the power. "No," she said quietly. Nathaniel's eyes widened, genuine shock crossing his features. Clearly no one had refused him in centuries. "If you want my cooperation," Eleanor continued, her voice growing stronger, "you'll grant me terms. First, my family and village are protected, not just now, but permanently. Put it in writing with whatever magic makes such contracts binding. Second, you'll provide my mother with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Third, I'll be treated as a guest in this manner, not a prisoner or a servant. And fourth," she paused, gathering courage for the most audacious demand. "Fourth?" Nathaniel prompted, his voice dangerous. "You'll teach me to read," Eleanor said, "properly. Not just sounding out words, but everything. Literature, history, philosophy. If I'm bound to you, I won't be kept ignorant." The silence stretched. Nathaniel stared at her as if she'd sprouted additional heads. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to respect. "You have the curse mark burning through my chest, threatening to end my existence, and you negotiate for education?" "Knowledge is the only thing that can't be taken away," Eleanor replied. "Everything else you could revoke on a whim. But what I learn, what I understand, that's mine forever." Nathaniel regarded her with new attention, really seeing her for perhaps the first time. Not a peasant girl in patched clothing, but a person with desires beyond survival, with the audacity to bargain when she held a winning hand. "Done," he said finally. "All 4 terms. Come here and seal the agreement." Eleanor approached slowly, her heart pounding. Up close, she could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. Could a vampire even sweat? The curse was killing him, moment by moment. "How do we—" she began. "Your wrist," Nathaniel said. "It's less intimate than the neck." Eleanor extended her hand, trying not to tremble. Nathaniel took it gently, his fingers cool against her skin, and she felt the strangest sensation, a connection, a recognition, as if her blood already knew its purpose. When his fangs pierced her wrist, Eleanor gasped, not from pain, there was shockingly little of that, but from the intensity of the sensation. It felt like warmth spreading through her veins, like a string pulled taut between them, vibrating with shared life force. Nathaniel drank, and with each swallow, Eleanor watched the transformation. Color returned to his skin. The black veins receded, pulling back from his throat and stomach like shadows fleeing dawn. His eyes cleared from cloudy gray to brilliant silver. He released her wrist after less than a minute, his tongue sealing the small wounds with supernatural efficiency. When he looked at her again, he was himself, beautiful, vital, powerful. But something in his expression had changed. Confusion warred with wonder. "Your blood," he said slowly, "it doesn't just sustain me. It's—" He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. Eleanor cradled her wrist, feeling lightheaded, but not dangerously so. "It's what?" Nathaniel composed himself, the Lord's mask sliding back into place. "Marcus will prepare rooms for you in the East Wing. You'll find appropriate clothing and anything else you require. Lessons will begin tomorrow evening." "Just like that?" Eleanor asked. "We have a bargain, and now you dismiss me?" "What else would you have me do?" Nathaniel's tone was cold again, The brief moment of vulnerability sealed away. Thank you? We both got what we needed to survive. Don't mistake necessity for sentiment. The words stung more than Eleanor wanted to admit. She'd known he was cruel, had experienced it firsthand, but some foolish part of her had hoped that the intimacy of sharing blood might have softened him. She was wrong. "Very well, my lord," Eleanor said, injecting every ounce of ice she could into her tone. "I'll see you tomorrow evening, then. Try not to mock anyone's freely given love in the meantime. The next curse might not be so accommodating." She left before he could respond, before she could see whether her words had landed. Marcus waited outside, and if he was surprised by her composure, he hid it well. The rooms he led her to were indeed in the East Wing, and they were magnificent. A bedroom with a canopy bed that could sleep 5, a sitting room with a fireplace already crackling, and a wardrobe filled with dresses that, while not new, were of far better quality than anything Eleanor had owned in her life. She stood in the center of it all, surrounded by luxury, and felt utterly alone. She'd saved a monster's life. She'd bargained for her future, and somehow, despite everything, despite his cruelty and her humiliation, she still felt that treacherous pull toward him, that sense that beneath his centuries of practiced indifference, Nathaniel Thorne was as trapped as she was. The next evening, Eleanor woke to find a simple but elegant dress laid out for her, along with soft leather slippers that actually fit. A servant girl, human, barely older than Eleanor herself, brought water for washing and informed her that Lord Thorne expected her in the library after sunset. The library took Eleanor's breath away. 3 stories of books, their spines gleaming in lamplight, surrounded by galleries and ladders on rolling rails. She'd never imagined so many books could exist in one place. Nathaniel waited by a reading table, looking fully recovered. He was dressed less formally than their previous encounters, in a simple white shirt and dark trousers, and the effect was somehow more unsettling. Without his elaborate lord's clothing, he looked younger, more human. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "We'll start with basics. Can you read at all?" "A little," Eleanor admitted. "The village priest taught interested children their letters when I was young. But I never progressed beyond simple words." Nathaniel selected a slim volume from the table. "Well, begin with this. It's a collection of folk tales, simple language, but clever construction. Read the first page aloud." Eleanor opened the book, squinting at the letters in the lamplight. She began haltingly, stumbling over words, painfully aware of her inadequacy. But Nathaniel didn't mock her. He corrected gently, explained pronunciation, pointed out patterns in letter combinations that would help her decode unfamiliar words. An hour passed, then 2. Eleanor found herself relaxing, drawn into the rhythm of learning. Nathaniel was a patient teacher, more patient than she'd expected possible from someone who'd been so cruel. "Why are you doing this?" she asked during a break, when he'd gone to retrieve another book. "You could have demanded only blood. Why agree to teach me?" Nathaniel paused, his back to her. "You negotiated skillfully. I respect capability, even in unexpected places. That's not an answer." He turned, and something flickered in his silver eyes. "No, it's not, but it's all you're getting tonight." They continued until Eleanor's eyes grew heavy with fatigue. Nathaniel noticed immediately and closed the book. "Enough, you need rest. Will you—" Eleanor hesitated. "Will you need to feed again soon?" "Not for several days. The curse seems satisfied with regular sustenance, not constant draining." He studied her face. "Why? Are you afraid?" "No," Eleanor said, and realized it was true. She should be afraid, of him, of this situation, of her uncertain future. But the fear had transmuted into something else. Wariness, perhaps. Determination, certainly, but not terror. "The feeding wasn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Pain. Violation. Not—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the strange warmth, the unexpected connection. "Not comfort," Nathaniel finished softly. When Eleanor looked at him sharply, he continued, "It's the same for me." Your blood doesn't just sustain, it soothes. I've lived 3 centuries feeling constantly cold. Not physically, but spiritually, as if something vital was missing. When I drink from you, that cold recedes. The admission hung between them, more intimate than the feeding itself. The curse is more sophisticated than I first believed, Nathaniel continued. It's not just binding me to your blood, it's binding me to you, to your kindness, your warmth, the very things I mocked. Eleanor's heart twisted. Is that why you're being kind now? Because the curse makes you? I don't know, Nathaniel said, and the honesty in his voice shook her. I don't know what's the curse, what's necessity, and what's... He stopped abruptly. Get some rest. We'll continue tomorrow. He left before Eleanor could press further, his departure swift and almost fleeing. Days became weeks, and a pattern emerged. Eleanor spent her mornings sleeping, her afternoons exploring the manor and its grounds, and her evenings in the library with Nathaniel. Every few days, she fed him from her wrist, and each time, the connection between them grew stronger, more undeniable. He taught her to read, then to write. They moved from folk tales to poetry to history. Eleanor proved a voracious learner, asking questions that challenged even Nathaniel's centuries of accumulated knowledge. Their discussions grew heated, intellectual sparring that left them both energized. The other inhabitants of the manor watched with barely concealed fascination. Marcus, the steward, seemed pleased by the change in his master. The other vampires in residence, there were 5 permanent residents besides Nathaniel, treated Eleanor with cautious respect, though she caught their speculative glances. The human servants were warmer. They'd expected Eleanor to be treated as livestock, a living blood bag locked away and used. Instead, she dined at Nathaniel's table, wore fine clothes, and spoke to their lord as something approaching an equal. It gave them hope for kinder treatment themselves. One evening, 6 weeks into her residence, Eleanor found Nathaniel in the manor's portrait gallery. He stood before a painting of a woman with kind eyes and elaborate Renaissance clothing. "Your mother?" Eleanor asked, joining him. "My wife." The word hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "You were married?" 350 years ago, before I was turned. Nathaniel's voice was distant, locked in memory. "Catherine, we had 5 years together before plague took her. I was turned shortly after, in my grief-stricken wandering. A vampire thought I'd be a pretty addition to her collection." "Did you love her?" "I thought I did. Now?" He glanced at Eleanor. "Now I wonder if I even understood what love meant. I was 23, she was 19. We were children playing at adult emotions." "That doesn't make what you felt less real," Eleanor said softly. "Doesn't it? I've lived 14 lifetimes since then. Catherine's face is a blur in my memory, preserved only in this portrait. What kind of love fades so completely?" Eleanor moved closer to the painting, studying Catherine's expression. "Maybe love changes but doesn't fade. Maybe you carry who she was, what she taught you, even if you can't remember exactly how she smiled." Nathaniel looked at her with such intensity that Eleanor's breath caught. "How did you become so wise? You're barely 20. You've lived your entire life in poverty, and yet you speak like someone who's weathered centuries." "Hardship ages the heart," Eleanor replied. "I learned young that every day is precious, that love is the only thing that makes suffering bearable. Maybe that's why I could love you from afar, even knowing you'd never see me. The feeling itself was beautiful, even if unrequited." Whatever had been about to say was interrupted by Marcus rushing into the gallery, his ancient face creased with alarm. "My lord, we have visitors, the Blackwood Coven." Nathaniel's entire demeanor changed, aristocratic coldness slamming down like a portcullis. Why? "They say they've heard rumors about your condition, about the curse. Lady Blackwood demands an audience." Eleanor felt ice in her veins. She'd heard stories about the Blackwood Coven, old vampires, powerful ones, who considered themselves royalty among their kind. If they knew about the curse, about her— "Go to your rooms," Nathaniel commanded. "Lock the doors. Don't emerge until I come for you." "What will you tell them?" "Whatever I must to keep you safe." He gripped her shoulders, his touch urgent. "Eleanor, listen to me carefully. The Blackwoods are dangerous. They believe vampires should rule humans absolutely, that we're gods and mortals are cattle. If they discover you're the key to my survival, they'll use you against me, against all of us." "Then lie," Eleanor said. "Tell them the curse is broken, that you've recovered." "They'll want proof. They'll want to see me feed from someone else." "Can you? Even if it doesn't truly sustain you, can you drink from someone else to maintain the illusion?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I don't know. The curse might react violently. It might interpret the attempt as betrayal and accelerate my death." "Then we have to try something else." Eleanor's mind raced. "A witch. There must be witches who could create a convincing illusion of me being ordinary, of you being cured. Magic created this curse. Maybe magic can hide it." "There's a hedge witch in the forest," Marcus interjected. "Morgana Fell. She owes us a debt. We protected her from hunters last winter." "Fetch her," Nathaniel said, "immediately. And tell the Blackwoods I'll receive them in an hour." Marcus vanished. Nathaniel turned back to Eleanor, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never expected to see from him. "If this goes wrong," he began. "It won't," Eleanor interrupted. "We're bound, remember? Your survival is mine. We'll figure this out." He touched her face gently, his cool fingers tracing her jaw. "How did I become so dependent on you? Not just for blood, but for this, for your courage when I have none." "You've always had courage," Eleanor said. "You're just not used to caring whether you live or die. That changes everything." The moment stretched, charged with unspoken feelings. But Marcus's return with a wild-haired woman in earthen robes broke the spell. Morgana Fell had eyes like a hunting bird and a smell of herbs and wood smoke. She assessed the situation with unsettling speed, looking between Nathaniel and Eleanor with a knowing expression. "A love curse," she pronounced. "Poetic. Who did you scorn, my lord?" "She's standing right here," Nathaniel said dryly. "Oh, this is delicious. The scorned lover is the cure?" Whatever witch crafted this curse understood irony. She circled Eleanor like a cat stalking a mouse. "And now you need me to hide the connection, to make it seem like any vampire could feed you." "Can you do it?" Eleanor asked. "Easily, but it will cost." "Name your price," Nathaniel said immediately. "Not gold, Lord Thorn. Something more valuable. A promise. When I have need, you will answer my call. No questions, no hesitation." Eleanor saw Nathaniel hesitate. Such open-ended promises were dangerous, especially to witches. But what choice did they have? "Done," Nathaniel agreed. Morgana smiled, revealing surprisingly sharp teeth. "Wonderful. Now, girl, hold still." The witch's magic felt like spider silk settling over Eleanor's skin, invisible but present, changing how the world perceived her. Morgana chanted in a language Eleanor didn't recognize, her hands weaving patterns in the air that left trails of green light. "There," Morgana said finally. To anyone who looks, you'll appear to be magically bound to Lord Thorn, but through his power rather than the reverse. They'll believe you're a thrall, enslaved by his will, incapable of refusing him. The curse itself will be invisible. How long will it last? Eleanor asked. Until I release it, or until you die, whichever comes first. Morgana looked at her seriously. Be careful, child. Vampires who see you as a slave rather than his equal will treat you accordingly. The illusion protects the secret, but it endangers you in other ways. Before Eleanor could respond, Marcus appeared again. My lord, the Blackwoods grow impatient. Then let's not keep them waiting, Nathaniel said, his voice once again the cold aristocrat's. He looked at Eleanor. You'll attend me in the receiving hall. Say nothing unless directly questioned. Keep your eyes down. We need them to believe you're a possession, nothing more. The transformation hurt more than Eleanor expected. Minutes ago, he'd touched her face with tenderness. Now he spoke to her as he might address a dog. But she understood. This was survival. This was the mask he wore to keep them both alive. The Blackwood Coven waited in the grand receiving hall, and they were magnificent and terrible. Lady Seraphina Blackwood stood at the center, a vampire who looked perhaps 30, but carried herself with ancient authority. Her beauty was sharp-edged, cruel, and her eyes held no warmth whatsoever. 4 others flanked her. 2 men, 2 women, all radiating power. Nathaniel entered with Eleanor trailing behind him, eyes lowered as instructed. She could feel the Blackwoods' attention fix on her like the focus of hungry predators. Lady Blackwood, Nathaniel said smoothly, to what do I owe the pleasure? Don't insult me with pleasantries, Thorn. Seraphina's voice was silk over steel. We've heard you were cursed, that you nearly died. Yet here you stand, apparently recovered. I'd like to know how. A minor magical inconvenience, Nathaniel replied, resolved with appropriate force. A hedge witch thought to extort me. She's been dealt with. Really? Seraphina drifted closer, her movements liquid and predatory. Because our informants say the curse was quite specific, that it bound you to a single food source, a particular human. Eleanor's heart hammered, but she kept her eyes down, playing the subservient thrall. Informants gossip, Nathaniel said coldly. Then you won't mind proving your recovery. Seraphina gestured to one of her companions, who brought forward a young woman, terrified, shaking, clearly compelled against her will. Feed from her. Show us you're unbound. The silence was absolute. Eleanor could feel Nathaniel's hesitation, could sense him calculating odds and risks. I don't perform for audiences, Nathaniel said finally. You do when your loyalty to our kind is questioned. Seraphina's smile was poisonous. Unless, of course, the rumors are true. Unless you are bound to that little human you brought with you. Unless you've become weak. The insult hung in the air. Eleanor understood vampire politics enough now to know that weakness was unforgivable among their kind. If Seraphina believed Nathaniel was compromised, she'd move against him, seize his territory, possibly kill him. Eleanor made a decision. She stepped forward, raising her eyes to meet Seraphina's directly, something no thrall would dare. He's bound to me, she said, by curse, by blood, by choice. And that doesn't make him weak. It makes him dangerous. The room erupted. The Blackwood vampires hissed, moving forward. Marcus and Nathaniel's retainers positioned themselves protectively. Nathaniel himself grabbed Eleanor's arm, his grip crushing. "Eleanor," he began, but she cut him off. "You can't hide this, Nathaniel. They'll keep testing, keep pushing until they expose the truth. Better to control the narrative." She looked at Seraphina again. "Yes, he's cursed. Yes, he needs my blood specifically. But ask yourself, how powerful must a curse be to bind a 300-year-old vampire lord? And how powerful must the connection be that sustains him?" Seraphina's eyes narrowed. "You speak boldly for livestock." "I'm not livestock. I'm his partner. The magic that binds us flows both ways. Harm me, and you harm him. Kill me, and he dies. But threaten him." Eleanor let power enter her voice, channeling every ounce of conviction she possessed, "and you'll discover that a human with nothing to lose is far more dangerous than a vampire with everything to protect." It was a bluff, a magnificent, audacious bluff. Eleanor had no power, no magic of her own, nothing but words and will. But she delivered the lie with such conviction that even she almost believed it. Seraphina studied her with new respect. Fascinating. The curse created a symbiote, a true bonding. She circled both of them, considering, this changes the political landscape significantly. A vampire who can only feed from one source is vulnerable. But a vampire bound to a human who shares his power, who amplifies it. "Exactly," Eleanor said, praying she was reading the situation correctly. "We're not master and slave. We're something unprecedented, something you've never seen before." The Blackwood vampires exchanged glances. Eleanor could see calculation behind their eyes, could almost hear them reassessing threats and alliances. Finally, Seraphina laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Well played, little human, very well played. You've turned a curse into an advantage, a weakness into a weapon." She looked at Nathaniel. "Keep her alive, Thorn, and keep her happy. I suspect she's the most dangerous thing in this room." The Blackwoods departed shortly after, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. The moment the doors closed, Nathaniel rounded on Eleanor. "What were you thinking? You could have gotten us both killed." "I was thinking they'd never stop testing you," Eleanor shot back. "I was thinking that hiding makes you look weak, but owning it makes you look powerful. I was thinking—" Nathaniel kissed her. It was sudden, fierce, desperate, the kiss of a man who'd held back too long, who'd tried to maintain distance and failed. Eleanor froze for a heartbeat, then kissed him back with equal intensity, pouring weeks of tension and longing into the contact. His hands tangled in her hair, hers gripped his shirt, and for a moment the world contracted to just this, the two of them finally honest. When they broke apart, both breathless, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "I've been such a fool," he whispered, trying to pretend this was just the curse, just necessity. "But Eleanor, Don't." Eleanor pressed her fingers to his lips. "Don't say it unless you mean it. Don't say it because the curse makes you feel connected to me. Say it when you're certain it's real." "How will I know?" Nathaniel asked, and the vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. "You'll know," Eleanor said softly, "when the fear of losing me outweighs the fear of loving me, when you'd rather die than see me hurt, when my happiness matters more than your pride." "Then I've known for weeks," Nathaniel said. "I've known since you negotiated terms instead of begging for mercy, since you demanded education instead of gold, since you faced down Seraphina Blackwood with nothing but audacity and wit." Eleanor wanted to believe him. Every fiber of her being wanted to fall into this, to trust that the man who'd mocked her love had become someone capable of returning it. but the wound he'd inflicted still ached. "You destroyed me," she said quietly, "in the village square, in front of everyone. You took the most vulnerable thing I'd ever done and made it a joke." Nathaniel flinched as if struck. "I know. Eleanor, I know, and I have no excuse except my own cruelty. I was a monster long before the curse. I'd spent 3 centuries taking what I wanted, using people as objects. Your love was real and pure, and I couldn't comprehend it, so I destroyed it. Can you comprehend it now?" "I'm learning to." He cupped her face in his hands. "Every day with you teaches me. Your kindness when you had every right to hatred. Your courage when you should be afraid. Your brilliance that shames my centuries of learning. You're remaking me, Eleanor, not the curse, you." Eleanor searched his eyes, looking for deception, for manipulation. She found only sincerity and something that might have been hope. "We need time," she said finally. "I need time. The curse binds us physically, but trust has to be earned." "Then I'll earn it," Nathaniel promised, "however long it takes." The weeks that followed were different. Nathaniel courted Eleanor properly, with the deliberate care of someone trying to rebuild what had shattered. He brought her books he thought she'd enjoy, discussed philosophy late into the night, showed her the manor's secrets, hidden gardens, a tower observatory where they watched stars through telescopes, a music room with instruments from a dozen countries. He fed from her wrist every few days, and each time the connection deepened. Eleanor began to feel his emotions through the blood bond, his ancient loneliness, his growing affection, his fear that he'd never truly deserve her forgiveness. And her own feelings grew complicated. The man she'd loved from afar had been a fantasy, a projection of her hopes onto a distant figure. The man she knew now was real, flawed, working to become better, capable of both tenderness and cruelty. This Nathaniel was harder to love, but worth loving more. 2 months after the Blackwood visit, Eleanor woke to find her mother in the manor's receiving hall. "Mama!" Eleanor ran to embrace her, shocked. "What are you doing here?" Mary Ashby looked overwhelmed by her surroundings, but determined. She was a small woman, worn by hard labor, but her eyes held the same stubborn strength as her daughter's. "I needed to see you," Mary said. "The money came, the gold Lord Thorne promised. It's more than enough, Eleanor, enough for 10 lifetimes. But I needed to know, are you happy here, or are you a prisoner pretending?" Eleanor glanced at Nathaniel, who stood at a respectful distance, giving them privacy. "I'm not a prisoner, Mama. It's complicated, but I'm not a prisoner." "That's not the same as happy." Eleanor considered. Was she happy? The question seemed absurdly simple for such a complex situation. She was bound by curse to a vampire lord. She could never leave without killing him. Her old life was gone, her future uncertain. But she was learning things she'd only dreamed of. She was challenged intellectually every day. She was falling in love with someone who was trying desperately to deserve her. "I'm becoming happy," Eleanor said finally. "It's a work in progress." Mary studied her daughter's face, then looked at Nathaniel. "You hurt her," she said bluntly. "Before all this, in the village square, I saw her face when she came home." "I did," Nathaniel acknowledged, approaching. "I was cruel, and I have no defense except ignorance and centuries of practiced callousness. I'm trying to become worthy of her forgiveness." "Are you succeeding?" Nathaniel looked at Eleanor. "You'd have to ask her." "He's trying," Eleanor said softly. "That has to count for something." Mary embraced her daughter again. "Then I'll trust your judgment. But Eleanor, promise me, if you ever stop being happy here, if you ever want to leave, you'll find a way to let me know. I may be a simple laundress, but I'll move heaven and earth to get you out." "I promise, Mama." After Mary left, Eleanor found Nathaniel in the portrait gallery again, this time staring at his own image, a painting from when he was human before the turning. "I barely recognize him," Nathaniel said. That young man had no idea what he'd become, what centuries of immortality would cost. "What did it cost?" Eleanor asked, joining him. "Everything that makes life worth living. Connection, growth, the urgency that comes from knowing time is finite. I became a collector of experiences rather than a participant in life. I'd observed humanity from a distance, consumed it, literally and figuratively, but never truly joined it. Until now? Until you made that impossible." He turned to face her. "You've given me back mortality's greatest gift, the ability to care, to fear loss, to cherish the present because it's fleeting." Eleanor touched the painting, tracing the young man's hopeful smile. "Do you resent the curse? Truly?" "I did at first," Nathaniel admitted. "I raged against it, felt victimized by cosmic injustice. But now I think the curse was a mercy. A violent, painful mercy, but mercy nonetheless. It saved me from another 1,000 years of emptiness." "The witch who cursed you," Eleanor said slowly, "do you think she knew that this was rehabilitation rather than revenge?" "I don't know. Magic works in mysterious ways, and witches more mysteriously still." Nathaniel took Eleanor's hand. "Does it matter? Whether punishment or gift, the result is the same. I'm bound to you, and I'm grateful for the binding." Eleanor squeezed his hand, feeling the cool strength of his fingers. She was grateful too, though she'd never have chosen this path. Sometimes the greatest transformations came through suffering, through forced proximity to what you'd fled or who'd hurt you. They were both being remade in the crucible of their curse, and perhaps that was precisely the point. 3 months into Eleanor's residence, the first real test came. Nathaniel's younger brother, younger only in vampiric terms, turned 50 years after Nathaniel, arrived at Thornwood Manor with disturbing news. Alexander Thorne was as beautiful as his brother, but where Nathaniel had grown contemplative, Alexander remained aggressively hedonistic. "There's a hunter in the territory," Alexander announced without preamble, "a good one. He's killed 3 vampires in the last month, all in neighboring domains. The Conclave thinks he's moving toward Thornwood." "Hunters are mortal," Nathaniel said, dismissively. "They die easily enough." "Not this one. He's using magic, blessed weapons, protective wards, the works. And Nathaniel." Alexander's expression grew serious. "He's specifically targeting vampires with known weaknesses. He's intelligent, strategic. If he learns about your curse—" "He won't," Nathaniel interrupted, but Eleanor saw the flash of fear in his eyes. "He will," Eleanor said quietly. "The Blackwoods know. Their servants know. It's only a matter of time before word spreads. You can't keep secrets in immortal society. Someone always talks." Alexander looked at Eleanor with interest. "So this is the famous human, the one who's got my brother acting like a lovesick boy." He circled her appraisingly. "You're braver than you look, speaking so boldly." "Bravery is just fear with a purpose," Eleanor replied. "And right now, my purpose is keeping us both alive." "Us both," Alexander repeated with a smile. "How sweet. Tell me, little human, do you actually care about my brother, or are you just protecting your own neck?" "Both," Eleanor said honestly. "Is that so hard to believe?" "For a vampire, yes. For a human dealing with a vampire, unprecedented." Alexander's smile faded. "Which is precisely why you're both in danger. The hunter won't just target Nathaniel. He'll target you, knowing you're the key to killing him." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Eleanor felt cold spread through her veins. She'd been so focused on vampire politics, on the Blackwoods and court intrigue, that she'd forgotten about the oldest threat to vampire kind, human hunters who dedicated their lives to exterminating the undead. "Then we fortify," Nathaniel said. "Increase the guards, strengthen the wards around the manor." "And make yourselves prisoners?" Alexander shook his head. "No, you hunt the hunter, find him before he finds you." "Using what bait?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew the answer. Alexander's smile was sharp. "Using yourself, of course. Rumors say you're Nathaniel's weakness. Let those rumors spread. Let the hunter think he can draw Nathaniel out by threatening you. Then spring the trap." "Absolutely not," Nathaniel said flatly. "It's the smart play." "I said no, Alexander." "Actually," Eleanor interrupted, her mind racing, "it might work, with precautions." "Eleanor, listen to me." Eleanor moved to the center of the room, forcing both brothers to pay attention. "We could fortify and hide, but that just delays the inevitable. Eventually, the hunter finds a way in, or we're forced out by some other crisis. But if we control the confrontation, if we choose the battlefield, we have the advantage." "The advantage of using you as bait?" Nathaniel said bitterly. "How is that advantageous?" "Because I won't actually be bait. I'll be a decoy." Eleanor's plan crystallized as she spoke. "We let rumors spread that I'll be visiting the village. The real me stays here, protected by every vampire and ward you have. But we send someone else, someone who looks like me." "A glamour," Alexander said, catching on. "We dress up one of the vampire women with illusion magic, make her appear human, make her look like you. The hunter attacks, thinking he's found his target, and instead walks into an ambush." "Using our people as bait isn't much better," Nathaniel objected. "But vampires can defend themselves," Eleanor pointed out. "I can't." "And whoever volunteers will know the risks, will be armed and ready." Nathaniel looked between them, clearly hating every aspect of the plan, but unable to find a better alternative. Finally, he nodded grimly. "Well, do it, but with every precaution. Full security detail, contingency plans, and at the first sign the hunter realizes it's a trap, we extract immediately." The plan was set in motion. Nathaniel's retainer, a vampire woman named Lisette who'd been turned in her 30s, volunteered for the role. The hedge witch Morgana was summoned again, this time to create an elaborate glamour that made Lisette appear not just human, but specifically like Eleanor. Same height, same face, same mannerisms. Eleanor spent an uncomfortable afternoon coaching Lisette on how she moved, spoke, and held herself. It was surreal watching someone else wear her identity like a costume. "You flinch when people raise their voices," Lisette observed. "From your time in poverty?" "From my father," Eleanor said quietly. "He drank. He had a temper. He died when I was 12, but the habits remain." Lisette's ancient eyes softened. "Then I'll flinch appropriately. The details sell the illusion." The trap was laid. Rumors were carefully spread through the village. Eleanor Ashby, the poor girl who'd somehow captured Lord Thorne's attention, would be visiting her mother. The visit would be brief, lightly guarded, an opportunity for anyone watching. On the appointed day, Eleanor watched from a tower window as Lisette, wearing her face and simple dress, departed for the village with a small escort. The resemblance was perfect, even from a distance. If Eleanor hadn't known better, she'd have believed she was watching herself leave. Nathaniel stood beside her, tension radiating from every line of his body. "I hate this," he muttered. "I know." "If anything goes wrong, it won't," Eleanor said with more confidence than she felt. "Your people are capable." And the hunter doesn't know he's walking into a trap. They waited. An hour passed, then 2. The sun climbed toward its zenith, the one time of day when vampires were most vulnerable, though the old legends about bursting into flames were exaggerated. Strong sunlight weakened them, burned exposed skin, but didn't instantly incinerate. Then the alarm bells rang. Nathaniel was moving before Eleanor fully processed the sound, supernatural speed carrying him toward the stairs. Eleanor followed as quickly as her human legs allowed, her heart pounding. The throne room was chaos when she arrived. Lisette had been brought back on a stretcher, the glamour shattered, her face twisted in pain. Around her lay 2 dead vampires from the escort, and 1 very much alive human, bound in silver chains, unconscious, and bleeding from multiple wounds. The hunter. He was younger than Eleanor expected, perhaps 30, with sandy hair and a face that would have been handsome if not for the puckered scar running from temple to jaw. His clothing was practical, leather reinforced with what looked like blessed symbols stitched in silver thread. "What happened?" Nathaniel demanded, kneeling beside Lisette. "He knew," Lisette gasped. "The moment he saw me, he knew it wasn't really her. Said he could smell the deception, that no glamour could hide vampire stench. He attacked immediately. Blessed crossbow bolts, holy water grenades, the full arsenal." "How did you capture him?" "Tobias and Sarah tackled him." Lisette's voice broke. "They knew the bolts would kill them, but they did it anyway, gave me the opening to disarm him." Eleanor looked at the 2 dead vampires, young ones, turned within the last century, with whole futures ahead of them. They died protecting a decoy, protecting her by extension. The weight of it crushed her. "Wake him," Nathaniel commanded. "I want answers." A vampire servant threw water in the hunter's face. He came to with a gasp, immediately struggling against his bonds before realizing the futility. Silver burned vampire flesh, but it held strong against human strength as well. His eyes found Eleanor immediately, narrowed with recognition. "There you are, the famous Eleanor Ashby, smaller than I expected." "And you are?" Eleanor asked, keeping her voice steady. "Simon Webb, 5th-generation hunter. My family has been killing monsters for over 200 years. His gaze shifted to Nathaniel. "And you must be Lord Thorn, the vampire so powerful he needed to be brought down by cosmic justice." "How did you know about the curse?" Nathaniel demanded. "I have my sources. Vampires love to gossip, and humans love gold. Your secret was never as secure as you thought." Simon smiled, showing bloody teeth. "And now I'm here, exactly where I wanted to be." "You wanted to be captured?" Eleanor asked skeptically. "I wanted to be inside your fortress, past your wards, behind your walls." Simon's smile widened. "Do you think I came alone? Do you think I didn't plan for failure?" Nathaniel's eyes widened. "Marcus, check the perimeter!" The explosion cut him off. The east wall of the manor erupted in flames. Not normal fire, but the blessed silver flames that burned vampire flesh like acid. Alarms shrieked through the corridors. Screams echoed from multiple directions. "The sun grenades were always a distraction," Simon said calmly. "My real team is out there, setting the whole place ablaze. This fortress becomes your tomb, Lord Thorn, you and every vampire in it." Nathaniel grabbed Simon by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. "Or what? You'll kill me? I'm dead anyway. At least this way, I take you with me." Eleanor watched the silver flames spread, watched vampires fleeing deeper into the manor, away from windows and the fire that burned with unnatural hunger. Her mind raced through options, scenarios, desperately seeking a solution. Then she had it. "Nathaniel, let him go." "Eleanor, let him go and listen to me." Eleanor moved to stand directly in front of Simon. "You want Nathaniel dead. I understand that. You've spent your whole life training for this, following in your family's footsteps. But killing every vampire in this manor, including the servants and the humans who work here, that's not justice. That's genocide." "They're monsters," Simon said flatly. "Some are, some aren't. Some are just trying to exist." Eleanor took a deep breath. "I'll make you a deal. Call off your team, stop the assault, and I'll give you what you really want." "And what's that?" "Me. I'll leave with you. You can use me to control Nathaniel, to ensure he doesn't retaliate, to broker whatever terms you think will protect humans in this territory." "No," Nathaniel said immediately. Eleanor ignored him. "You're a strategist, Simon. You know that killing Nathaniel accomplishes nothing except creating a power vacuum that another, possibly worse vampire will fill. But if you have leverage over him, if you can ensure he adheres to rules that protect human life, you accomplish more than your entire family's legacy combined." Simon studied her intently. "Why would you sacrifice yourself?" "Because I'm tired of death," Eleanor said simply. "Because 2 vampires already died today protecting me, and I won't add more to that toll. Because there has to be a better way than endless cycles of revenge." The silence stretched. Eleanor could feel Nathaniel's rage, could sense through their bond how desperately he wanted to rip Simon apart. But she also knew she was right. This was the only path that didn't end in catastrophe. "Eleanor, don't do this," Nathaniel said quietly. "Please." She looked at him, memorizing his face. "You said you'd know you loved me when my happiness mattered more than your pride. But Simon, I know I love you because your life matters more than my freedom." "No." "Call them off," Simon said suddenly. "I'll call off my team." "But she comes with me, and you agree to a treaty. No more killing humans for sport. No more treating them as livestock. You feed only from willing donors, and you enforce the same rule in your territory." "Done," Nathaniel said without hesitation. "But I want assurances she'll be safe, that you won't harm her." "She's my leverage," Simon interrupted. "Harming her serves no purpose. She'll be housed comfortably, treated well. She's a hostage, not a prisoner." "There's a difference?" Eleanor asked weakly. "Hostages have value. Prisoners are disposable." Simon turned his head, shouting in a language Eleanor didn't recognize. Within moments, the flames began to die, the assault clearly called off. Nathaniel moved to Eleanor, gripping her shoulders. "I will get you back," he promised. "However long it takes, whatever I have to do." "I know," Eleanor said. And she did know. The bond between them was too strong now, too fundamental. They'd find each other again. "But Nathaniel, use this time. Use it to become the lord this territory needs. Protect your people, human and vampire alike. Prove to Simon that the treaty matters." "I'll prove it," Nathaniel swore. "And then I'll come for you." Eleanor was taken that night, escorted by Simon's team to a location she wasn't told. The last thing she saw was Nathaniel standing in the manor doorway, backlit by flames still smoldering in the wreckage of the assault, looking more human and vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. The hunter's compound was not what Eleanor expected. Rather than a prison, it resembled a small fortress. Sturdy stone buildings surrounded by walls, populated by dozens of humans who lived and trained there. It was a community, she realized, built around the singular purpose of protecting humanity from supernatural threats. Simon had not lied about her treatment. Eleanor was given a comfortable room, allowed to move freely within the compound, and treated with cautious respect by the other hunters. They watched her constantly, but never threatened her. What surprised her most was the library. Smaller than Nathaniel's, but impressive nonetheless, filled with journals documenting generations of encounters with vampires, werewolves, witches, and entities Eleanor had never heard of. "You can read?" Simon asked one evening, finding her deep in a hunter's account from the 1700s. "Lord Thorne taught me," Eleanor said. He's a good teacher." Simon sat across from her, his expression unreadable. "You love him. Genuinely." It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. "I do." "How?" "He's killed people, Eleanor. Hundreds of people over his lifetime. How do you reconcile loving someone with that much blood on their hands?" Eleanor closed the book carefully. "I don't know if I can. But I know he's trying to change. The curse forced him to see humans as people rather than prey. That doesn't erase his past, but it might redeem his future. And if it doesn't? If this is all manipulation, a sophisticated monster pretending to be capable of growth? Then I'll have been a fool," Eleanor admitted. "But I'd rather be a fool who believed in redemption than a cynic who never gave anyone a chance to change." Simon was quiet for a long moment. "My father was killed by a vampire," he said finally. "Drained dry and left in a ditch like garbage. I was 12. I've spent every day since preparing to hunt them, to make them pay for what they took from me." "I'm sorry," Eleanor said softly. "I don't want your sympathy. I want you to understand why I do this, why I can't just trust that Lord Thorn has suddenly developed a conscience." "Then don't trust him," Eleanor suggested. "Trust the treaty. Trust the actions, not the intentions. If he violates the agreement, you have me as leverage. But if he adheres to it, if he proves through sustained behavior that he's changed, maybe that's enough." "Maybe," Simon said, but he didn't sound convinced.